A news anchor is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by people of questionable knowledge.
Coming next on Broadcast Bulletin, we'll be talking to Joe Gazin, a former weeknight anchor in Corpus Christi, Texas. Joe worked in the industry for over 40 years. He'll tell us how he got into the industry.
Junior high sometime, I was kind of bitten with the idea that I should do something in the performance arts.
What brought him to Corpus Christi?
In 1977, I got the opportunity to come to Corpus Christi, Texas.
Some things viewers were surprised to learn about TV news.
They might be surprised to learn that it's actually being done live.
And so much more. This is Broadcast Bulletin.
Hi guys, welcome to Broadcast Bulletin. We appreciate you joining us. I'm Jacob Brooks.
And I'm Jim Stanton. Welcome to the new podcast that dives into the rapidly changing television news industry. We're so glad you're listening. Thank you for your support as always. I'm excited for this episode. Although I'm from San Antonio, born and raised, I have family down along the coastal bend. And so every summer as a child, we would always visit Corpus Christi and the beach. So this is my first exposure to watching TV stations that weren't the ones in my market. And so there was always a certain nostalgia attached to it. And the station we particularly watched was KIII, which is the ABC affiliate. I always watched Joe Gazin and the team there. That they've been the number one station for most of its existence. And that's in large part because of the stable team they've had and people like Joe Gazin who have been there for such a long time. Needless to say, he is an absolute icon in South Texas. So he spent over 50 years in the broadcasting industry. The vast majority of that was in Corpus Christi. He's originally from Los Angeles, but got to Texas as soon as he could. He also got his start as a radio host in Los Angeles, but in the 1970s, made the move to television and in Wisconsin. Television stuck, but Wisconsin did not. 2 years later, he wanted to go to a warmer climate, made that move to Corpus Christi at TV3, and he was there for 43 years. He retired from the day-to-day in Corpus Christi and from TV3 on May 28th, 2021 after the 6 o'clock newscast. I believe they called it the Cell of Gazin, which was pretty neat. That being said, Joe is hardly retired and continues to work, and now he runs his own video production business. But he has his evenings free now, and he is spending one of them with us. So he's going to share his story and his insight into his 4-decade career, as well as how he's seen the industry change and advice for those who want to follow in his footsteps.
You're watching KIII-TV's 3 News at 6 with Joe Gazin.
Defense lawyers for Selena's accused killer have a new and controversial request. A new tropical depression forms in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll tell you where it's likely to be headed. And good evening, everyone. Personal injury attorney Thomas J. Henry is facing a stiff fine for filing what an Aransas County district judge calls a frivolous lawsuit.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Gazin. Thanks for being with us on this Monday. Leslie is off tonight. We do want to begin with that tragic milestone reached this afternoon as the nation continues to battle the COVID pandemic.
So, Joe, we are so honored to have you with us tonight on Broadcast Bulletin.
Well, thanks very much, Jim and Jacob. And I'll tell you what, the honor is mine. You got it right. 43 years in Corpus Christi and the coastal bend area of South Texas, not far from San Antonio. And it was a good vantage point, I think, for me, because I was able to see over that long period just how this industry has changed and is continuing to change and evolve as we speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've definitely seen a lot of changes, and we're definitely going to get into that. But let's ask the first question to you. So when did the broadcast bug hit you? Talk about that moment up to your college days, and then how did you end up in radio?
Yes, in junior high sometime, I was kind of bitten with the idea that I should do something in the performance arts. And so it was just always something I enjoyed. I enjoyed the public speaking and talking in front of others and that sort of thing. And I realized quickly, growing up in Los Angeles, that you couldn't just get on the air there very easily, especially not in television. And so I started in radio, and I was very fortunate. I went to USC, and they had their own campus radio station, but the station was a powerful FM facility, about 30,000 watts, I believe, covered all of Southern California. And so while it was a place where I could make some mistakes as a young broadcaster, it was also a place where I kind of was able to get my feet wet and have some influence around Southern California. And I gravitated to talk radio because that's really what I enjoyed. My feeling was, rightly or wrongly, that anyone could spin records. And I mean, no disrespect to those who spin records, but that it took a little bit more, a little something extra to be able to talk your way through several hours of a program. And so that's how I started out on the campus radio station there at USC. And then I got a huge break. I got to work at KABC in Los Angeles, the owned and operated ABC station. And I had a show, a 4-hour program in between Tom Bradley, who was then the mayor of Los Angeles, and Regis Philbin, who was a well-known personality even back then. So I just got a tremendous opportunity. My show at the time lasted about, I don't know, 6 months, something like that. And then I got fired from KABC in Los Angeles. And the explanation was they wanted all names in there. And I was just a kid. I had no particular name value at the time in Los Angeles. And so they replaced me with Robert Vaughn, the actor, the man from Uncle. And so they had all names in those hours, and they were hoping it would work for them. I don't think it actually did, but in Los Angeles, they change talent, like most people change underwear and so forth. It's not uncommon. And frankly, being fired, while it was a devastating experience at the time, I think in retrospect, it was actually very helpful that I got to experience that. And you'll, I'm sure, hear from many broadcasters, longtime broadcasters, who know firsthand what it's like to be fired. But in my view, it kind of builds character, and it helped to shape me and help me to work harder for the jobs that I got after that.
All right, so I have a 2-part question for this next one. Let me ask you the first part first. So when did you decide to make the transition over to television news, and why?
I was in radio for about, I guess, 7 years or so in Southern California. After getting fired at KABC, I went to the San Fernando Valley area, and I worked at a little station in Thousand Oaks. And the station was actually a music station, but I had a talk show right smack dab in the middle of the afternoon. And they let that go on for a while because, and it was really fun to do. I had all the celebrity guests that were appearing then on the Tonight Show and all the big talk shows in LA. And they would actually make the trek out to the San Fernando Valley and talk with me. So it was fun, but after a while, the management and ownership of the station decided they wanted to have a solid format throughout the broadcast day. So they just basically eliminated my show. And I, at that point, decided, you know what, I may have a face for radio, but I'm going to give it a shot and try to be on TV. And I remember I packed my Lincoln, let's see, it was a Mercury Montego, full of my possessions and my audition tapes and any video I could gather, and traveled up and down the state of California trying to find a job in television. And it just did not work. No one was willing to give me that chance. The one opportunity that I got was from a kind-hearted news director at KCRA, I'll never forget, in Sacramento, a powerhouse station back then and still is today, who gave me he said he didn't have a job for me, but he said he would let me make an audition tape on an honest to goodness news set. And so that was my opportunity. I did that. Then I had an audition tape to work with and went back to Los Angeles. I got myself an agent who was kind of a shyster at the time. He wanted a percentage of whatever I would make with my first job, but I agreed to it. And he got me a job in Wisconsin, in a little town called Wausau, on TV. But so I drove my Mercury all the way across country to Wisconsin and experienced cold like I'd never experienced it before, and got my feet wet there. From Wausau, I eventually moved down to the capital city of Madison and worked there for another year. And then in 1977, I got the opportunity to come to Corpus Christi, Texas, which again was another shock because I'd gone through a particularly tough winter in Wisconsin. And I remember calling home at the time after I came down here to look around, and I said, no matter what they're offering, we are taking, because I was just tired of the cold. And so that was, the 43 years ago in 19 here, and stayed ever since, and enjoyed it and grew and kind of had a front row seat to all the changes I mentioned.
So you do not have a formal journalism degree. Do you feel like that ever hurt you in your career, or did it afford you a different perspective your colleagues might not have had?
No, I was a speech communication major at SC, and at SC it had nothing to do with performance. It had to do with speech pathology, actually. So my best education was actually that time that I spent on the campus radio station. That's where I learned the most, learned all the fundamentals, I guess, about radio and what that took. So the answer to your question is probably no. I don't think the degree in journalism would have made that much difference. I kind of learned as I worked.
All right, so let's talk about your day-to-day as the lead evening anchor at 3 News. I'm sure many viewers assume you just showed up, read the teleprompter, and went home. But what really went into your job? Like, what time did you get there? What did you have to do? Just walk us through your day.
Well, the typical day, it was a mistake to assume. A lot of people do assume that because they see you twice a day at 6 and 10 in this market. And assume that that's, the only time that you're working. Obviously, it's not. I got there at about 2 in the afternoon. I went into an editorial meeting right away where we kind of went over the stories of the day and what we had to work with. And beyond that, we actually discussed the format they would be presented in, either a self-contained reporter package, as we call them, or a VO head, a voiceover, an anchor voiceover with a soundbite, that kind of thing. We discussed all of that. We even talked about the placement in the show at that point. And so that was our editorial meeting. Then we broke that up and we got about the business of writing. And I always had a producer or two who would do much of the writing initially for the show, but I was never comfortable as an anchor just reading something that somebody else wrote. So I always reserved the right to take a look at the copy, adjust it to the way I wanted to read it. Obviously, not changing any of the facts, but just adjusting the style and the placement of certain things. And so I always did that. And I would take a script that somebody else provided and typically change it a bit so that it fit my style of reading. And that's I did that. That took several hours, and often I didn't get a chance to look it over very carefully. I would usually read it once through, but honestly, when you take part in the writing, one of the advantages it gives you is you have a working knowledge of the script, of the facts of the story. And so that helps you. I always recommend to young journalists that they understand, try to understand as much as they can about the stories they read on the air, because that will save you. If you flub a word here and there, if you don't know what you're talking about, it will tend to destroy you on the air, and you really can't have that. So you need to be able to recover quickly. And one way to do that is to have a good working knowledge of the information. And I tried to do that. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what I did. I somehow managed to fill up my days. And then the same process happened for the evening show. We would break for dinner after the early show, come back, and typically there'd be several new items in the show, and then items from the 6 o'clock that we had to rewrite and make a little bit different for the 10 o'clock. The idea was always to present a 10 o'clock show that was different from the 6, and to basically give people a reason to watch. If they've watched the early show, you want to try to give them a reason to watch the late show as well.
So what is one thing you feel most viewers would be surprised to learn about TV news?
They might be surprised to learn that when they see their favorite newscaster delivering the news, that it's actually being done live. I can't tell you how many times that I was asked, you guys tape that, don't you? And I came back and said, no, we are completely live. And so that may be one thing. The other thing is that, the number of people involved in putting a newscast on television. In our case, in our, comparatively small marketplace here in South Texas, we still had about 50 people that I would say had some responsibility in putting our newscast on the air. And if anyone in that chain fell down on their job or didn't do what they were supposed to, it had an impact on the air. So, that always kind of surprised people. I know that there are so many people that they don't see behind the scenes.
All right. So why did you stay at TV3 for so long? Did you ever get offers from other markets? Why did you turn them down? Do you regret it?
When I first came to South Texas, I guess I had the intention of finding another bigger place to work eventually and moving on. I never intended to stay as long as I did. And yet, time for me tended to go very quickly here. And so before I knew it, I was here 10 years, looked up again, it was 20. It really was one of those things where it just kind of grew on me. I, of course, had a wife and family and friends, and just kind of became entrenched here. And the lifestyle, as you know, Jim, in Corpus Christi is intoxicating. There's, we live right on the water. We engage in water sports. I have a boat right out back that I can just plop in the water and go anytime I want. And, there's just all kinds of amenities here that make this lifestyle worth having. And so when you take all of that in balance, you can go to a larger market and maybe make a little more money, but at the end of the day, you may not be happier with the change. And I guess I kind of came to that realization.
So talk about how the industry has changed over the years. Do you feel like journalism changed throughout your course in the business? Do you miss some of the old way of doing TV news? Or do you think the way it's done now is maybe an improvement?
I think there's some pluses and there's some minuses. And as we all know, I think even people outside the industry know that this is a business that has changed dramatically, and it's changed a lot just in the past, say, 5 years. So I wouldn't even begin to speculate what it's going to be like 5 years from now. Things are changing very quickly. Do I miss some of the things that happened back in the old days? I guess so. But I'll tell you, it's like, take something like this, a cell phone. I mean, back when I started in the industry, no one could have imagined that you could take something like this, a cell phone. First of all, most people didn't have them, but those, who did, you couldn't even think about the idea that you could take one of these and someday be able to broadcast live with decent quality from anywhere in the world. And yet now people do that all the time. In fact, there are a lot of places where much of the video is shot on a cell phone, and it gets on the air, and I defy people to tell the difference. It's really that good. So that's one big thing. The technology, I guess, is what I'm talking about. It's become so easy for people to practice journalism. I mean, you're doing it yourselves right now, whereas before that would have been unthinkable. It would have been impossible. The production costs, the equipment costs, and all of that would have been prohibitive. So that's one of the big ways, this industry has changed and will continue to change. As for the people practicing journalism, I think you would have to say that when you watch TV news now, especially local news, you've got to know that the people on the air are younger than they used to be. And they are, in many cases, learning their craft from the ground up, even though they're already on the air and in a position to influence folks. And, is that a good thing? Well, there are a lot of pluses and minuses surrounding that. There are new ways of thinking about things that we didn't in the old days. But, are all the journalistic values that we're taught in school rigidly upheld? Maybe not necessarily. So that might be concerning to some people. But the basic concept of gathering information and presenting it to an audience continues. And it's a give and take that will, that part of it will not change. Somebody will always be in a position to dispense information that we depend on. The way it gets done now and in the future may change. And one thing that I know is likely to change and is already changing in some respects. Back in the old days, people would gather around a TV at 6 or 10 or 5 to watch their favorite newscast, and that's where they got their news of the day. Nowadays, there are consultants in the industry who I've worked with who will tell you that by the time 6 or 10 rolls around, thanks to these things, people already have a basic understanding of the news of the day. They know what went on. So they depend on the broadcaster to give them something else, something they didn't already know.
So I'm really curious to get your thoughts on social media. Obviously, that's just, exploded during your career. Do you think it has helped or harmed journalism?
Okay, social media, and in fact, one of the requirements now, anchor people and reporters and all television personnel, all broadcast personnel, is to not only think about what goes on over the air, but to also come up with content and product that they can dispense on social media. That is every TV station has a web page and so forth, and they must produce content for those platforms. Back when I first started, that didn't exist. It wasn't even an issue. So what you're seeing now is, and that's one of the reasons that people are finding out about things before they get on the air, because of social media. And very often it's provided by the very same people who, through a broadcast outlet. But that is an additional amount of work that has to be done by the same people. And in smaller markets, you find that additional task or series of tasks is put on people who are already hard pressed to get things done and meet a deadline, which still exists. And that's another reason that maybe the change is coming a little too quickly to keep up with the demand for accuracy, and that it's kind of a danger we all face in the industry, getting something wrong. It happened to me, plenty of times back in the early days and up through modern times as well. But I would maintain that the opportunity for that to happen increases when you get more pressure put on you to achieve more in the same amount of time.
Yeah. So you did talk a couple minutes ago about how not just at your former station, but really in the industry as a whole, new people are younger. Have you learned anything from the younger reporters who have come through your station, and was there someone who influenced you the most?
Sure. Yeah, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned about, rap music stars that I had no idea existed. I think I've gone through a transition where I was initially reluctant to accept new information from people who I didn't think had the experience that it required. But I think I came to the point where look, they're doing the job. They are human beings, and they're working hard, just like I was and am. And so I should accord them the respect they deserve. And so the answer to your question is yes. People of all ages. Early on in my career, I took advantage of people who had more experience than I did and tried to gain as much as I can. That is a universal idea that holds true, I think, today, and it's still very someone doing something that you like and admire, try to things that they do. It will only make you get. That isn't to say copy them word for word or, movement by movement. I'm just saying that it's a sincere form of flattery, for one thing, to really admire what you do. And, would you mind if I just kind of pick your brain and follow you around a little bit? Most people don't mind that at all. But that's what I would recommend. And we all learn from each other. Sure.
As we alluded to earlier, while you retired from TV news, you're most certainly not retired. So talk about your video production company and what the day-to-day is like with that.
It's called Legal Video Specialists, with attorneys all around the country, and produce documentaries for their clients who may be injured through an act of negligence, or families who've lost a loved one through some kind of negligence or wrongdoing. And we present these videos, and we tell the stories of what these folks, typically a lot of tears and emotion and drama. It is a compelling case made on behalf of these personal injury attorneys, and the videos settlements before a case gets to trial. And so attorneys who use us are quickly finding that it makes sense to do a video like this, and in a way that is so compelling that nobody else talks. Everyone listens intently to what's being said.
So as someone who just retired from the business in May of 21, why are we, in your opinion, starting to see a lot more people leave the business, or what is being coined as the Great Resignation? For you personally, though, did COVID factor into your decision to leave? And then what do you think stations can do to increase employee retention and kind of avoid this, Great Resignation?
Interesting questions. No, COVID had no bearing at all, excuse me, on my decision to leave, I still have enough energy to do this work. And so I chose to do that. And you always, there's an axiom in show business that I think applies here as well. And you always want to leave people wanting more. You don't want to be on so long as to have people wondering when the heck off the air. So I didn't want to be in that position, and decided to leave while I thought, anyway, people still wanted more. I don't know if they do or not, but at least that's what they were saying. And as for, eliminating the Great Resignation, that's a universal problem that transcends the broadcast industry. It's affecting businesses and industries around the world, actually, because we people can work from home effectively. They can get things done. They might have found other ways to make enough money to live, and maybe they don't need the jobs that they had. But I think to make their jobs interesting and enjoyable, and not something that people hate. And in so doing, they will come back and hopefully stay with them for a good long time.
And then do you think because of the loss of all these outlets, it's going to be harder for someone who wants to be a journalist to find a job?
There will always be jobs in the industry and in television particularly. But what you're seeing change is that people are getting younger. They are working for less money, and fewer careers are being offered. I mean, there's a difference between a job and a career. And I think that you're always going to have jobs, but whether someone is able to make enough to not only survive, but support a family and to live and grow in a community, that's open to question now. And it's certainly going to be a lot harder.
So out of your nearly 44 years over at Channel 3, what was the most memorable story you reported on in your time there?
So many, but you'd have to say the Selena murder was up there. We were the focal point of the world at that time. We had a woman who was holding herself hostage, threatening to kill herself in a standoff with police after shooting and killing this immensely popular international performer, and someone who all of us in Corpus Christi knew pretty well because we had seen her grow up. So it was emotional. It was shocking, and there was a certain amount of excitement, I will say, because of the attention that we were getting. I mean, we were all very sad about what happened, but it was kind of cool to be the focus of everyone's attention for this period of time.
What is something you learned about your job that you would go back and tell your younger self going into the business, hey, this is something you absolutely need to know?
Well, to be prepared for the challenges to your own feeling of self-worth. Early on, there is a tendency to think that you're kind of a big deal, like the Anchorman movie. But you are reminded along the way, you're not that big of a deal, that other things are far more important sometimes. It's kind of a shock to the system when you have to kind of learn that. So I would tell people early on that, you're part of it. You're not a star. That's not why, or shouldn't be why, you enter the business. You're there to do a job, as part of a team. And if you get some notoriety, so be it. That's fine. Don't take yourself too seriously, because if you do, you're bound to be disappointed at times and hurt, and get your feelings hurt. And so I would just urge people to kind of not take themselves so seriously. But the other thing I would urge them to do is to realize that this is a huge responsibility and requires a lot of the people doing it. And by that, I mean, it's important for you as a journalist to learn everything you can learn about a variety of topics, to read newspapers, the various news platforms out there today, to every day, to spend a good portion of your time absorbing as much as you can of what's going on in the world around you and in the community around you. It will serve you well in your career.
Me personally, I'm looking to go into TV news or digital news and be in front of the camera. So what is your advice for someone like myself and people who are listening who want to go into the industry?
You know, just like I was kind of alluding to before, you just try to stay humble. Try to understand that it's just TV. It's not brain surgery. You're not saving lives. You know, you're dispensing information, and you're very, very fortunate to be in that role, to have that opportunity. But at the end of the day, you will be successful if you work hard, and harder than other people around you. You're successful. You hear of people who, and I suppose there are exceptions where that applies, but you know, that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And honestly, that applies universally, but particularly in our business.
What was the most rewarding part of your job?
The most rewarding part was when I got to use television for doing good. And we had a number of charities that Children's Hospital was a big one. The area food bank was another one, and countless others, Ronald McDonald House, and on and on. And we were able to use the power of TV, the fact that we had a huge audience, and encourage people to donate at levels that made a positive difference. And in the case of Driscoll Children's Hospital, I know for a fact that the millions of dollars we raised, nearly 4 decades that we were doing telethons for them, that young lives were saved, that sick children became healthy again. And that made me feel terrific. You know, in terms of reward, I just don't think it gets better than that.
All right. Was there a moment when you ever had an embarrassing slip up on the air?
I remember doing a stand-up on the steps of the Pentagon in Washington. I was trying to be cool and walk down the steps as I was talking and delivering my lines, which I had memorized. And of course, as the camera's rolling, I go tumbling down the stairs of the Pentagon, and you know, I'm sure it looked hilarious, and it I guess must have been because it was one of the lead items in the national dinner in Washington that they have every year. It's a big event there, and so that video of me falling down the stairs was national news that night, because it was part of the blooper reel they had. So you know, that was one, and countless others. I remember once the set caught fire while I was reading reading the news. We had a big canopy overhead and it actually caught fire because one of the lights exploded and started on fire. We've had bugs walking across the set while we were talking. Just, crazy stuff. Was to kind of roll with it and try to make light of it. Again, if you don't take yourself too seriously, you're not going to be destroyed by something like that.
Is there anything we missed that you would like us to touch on?
You need to know going in that it's not the way it used to be. That long-time news anchors in big markets and making big money are very rare now. It really is a job that, I like to tell people that the job I had doesn't really exist anymore. And it's kind of sad. And so, for that reason, I would say just be aware. Journalism is an honorable career, and TV news is an honorable career. But just be aware of what you're getting into and the realities that exist now, and the fact that they're different than the way they used to be.
All right, you got to show us your shirt.
Oh yeah, okay. So I promised I'd wear this shirt. A news anchor is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by people of questionable knowledge. That kind of sums it up. No, I had to get that. I saw that online somewhere and I had to order that, but it's not fair. The people in this industry work very hard and they're good at what they do generally. So yes. I'm not going to trash the industry that kind of fed me for so many years and my family.
Yeah.
But once again, it's just a function of not taking yourself quite so seriously and having fun, because there's potential for that still in this business of television news.
All right, where can our listeners connect with you on social media?
Well, I have a Facebook page, just Joe Gazin, and then Legal Video Specialists, my company, is also on Facebook. I've got a website. The address is mylegalvideos.com.
Well, Joe, we were very honored to have you on tonight. We appreciate it.
The honor was mine.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Again, for those just tuning in, well, I'm sure if you're just tuning in, you missed a very good conversation with Joe Gazin, the lead anchor at KIII-TV in Corpus Christi, up until he retired in May of 2021. Jacob Brooks and Jim Stanton are your co-hosts for this. We release new episodes every Thursday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where you need to leave us 5 stars, Google Podcasts, and other platforms out there. And broadcastbulletinpodcast.com is the website. And finally, Instagram at Broadcast Bulletin. Please follow that for our updates. YouTube, subscribe at Broadcast Bulletin. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode.
Next Thursday on Broadcast Bulletin, Brittany Paletz-Gates joins the conversation with us. She spent a decade in the business, mostly as a weeknight anchor in Abilene, Texas. She'll discuss how she got her big break.
Originally, I actually wasn't even sure where I said yes to going to, because in my phone I had ND for news director, but I also had an offer from Fargo, North Dakota.
How becoming a mom began to change her perspective as a reporter.
I just felt a little nervous as I was making choices as a mom, and felt like I had to do everything perfect.
Why she made the jump over to real estate.
So I took the real estate test and I passed and started doing it with my husband, and it came really natural to me.
And so much more. That's next Thursday, wherever you find new episodes of Broadcast Bulletin. The views and opinions expressed by the guests in this episode of Broadcast Bulletin are solely theirs. They do not reflect those of their past or present employers, nor those of Broadcast Bulletin or its hosts in any way.